afternoon. Welcome to our Spotlight broadcast on KLVW. My name is Florence Markowitz, and I am your host for today's program. Our guest today is George Washington. Mr. President, we are honored to have you with us on the occasion of your birthday.
Well, thank you, Lady Florence. Do you mind me calling you that?
Not at all. It's an honor.
And I thank you for coming here to my home to have the interview. You know, with my condition, it's difficult for me to get around.
And what condition is that?
Well, you know, being dead and all.
Oh, yes, that would have some bearing on it. Well, let's get right to different things. There was no president before you. How did you become president? What was the process of becoming president?
Well, the first step in the process was creating the Constitution. We had just finished monumental work of creating the Constitution, and the Constitution specified the steps necessary to elect a president. And it required each state to provide electors. The quantity would be in proportion to the population of the state. And then the electors would have to select a president. To become president, a candidate would have to get 50% or more of the vote. And then whoever got the next number of votes would be the vice president.
Oh, well, I wonder when that changed, because we don't do it that way now.
No, I didn't know,
Yeah,
having been dead. And
yeah, I know, but I wonder when and why it changed. Well, tell us about some of your accomplishments. What are you most proud of, accomplishments?
Oh, well, there are a lot of things that most people would think I would be most proud of, like leading the nation to victory in the Revolutionary War, being the first president. But to tell the truth, what I think was my best accomplishment was not mine alone, but working with 54 other people to create the Constitution for the United States. If you stop to think of it, we were creating a government from scratch. There had been no other government just like that. And besides that, we were having to get agreement from representatives from 13 states who covered a wide variety of customs, religions, and so forth.
Did they fight
There was a,
to get agreement?
there was a lot of argument, believe me,
I can imagine.
and it was very difficult to get a consensus. But I really give credit to all of the representatives. Finally, they all were willing to compromise. If there was no spirit of compromise, there would be no Constitution and there would be no United States of America.
We could use that today. You had tremendous leadership qualities. How did you become such a great leader?
Well, I wasn't always a great leader, I have to tell you. When I was 20 years old, I was appointed a major in the Virginia Army, in the militia. Wow. And I fought, they assigned me originally 100 troops to go into the Ohio Valley and try to keep the French from making inroads in that area. And there were battles, and I must admit that I didn't win all of them. In fact, I didn't win most of them.
Really? Wow.
So no one thought me as a very great leader at that time. But what I did, as a result of my curiosity, I always tried to look at what happened after a battle and see what went wrong. And I came to recognize all of the factors that go into successful leadership. And that's not just leading your troops in battle, but taking care of the finances, the logistics, the training, the health of the troops, the morale of the troops. And so as a result of hard knocks, I I gained experience that really came invaluable later on.
Sure. Well, you were elected unanimously. Did you have any detractors? Did everybody love you?
Well, I was elected unanimously because I still had that kind of aura of having been a general who won the war. But I'll tell you, after actual governing started, it was a different situation.
Really?
Oh, yes. Some people who most people think were my great friends, like Thomas Jefferson, who was a friend, but he disagreed with an awful lot of the policies.
Really?
In fact, in the first session of Congress, there was quite a battle between those that thought there should be a strong central government and those that were very suspicious of a strong central government.
And which side were you on?
Well, even within my own cabinet, there was this disagreement. Like, I agreed pretty much with Alexander Hamilton, who thought there should be a strong central government and a national bank, but Thomas was very much in opposition to this. And as a matter of fact, much to my disappointed, they ended up creating factions. And within Congress, there were these factions. And a certain group came to agree with Thomas Jefferson, and they formed a party. They called it the Republican Party. Another group agreed with Hamilton, and they became the Democratic Party. I never joined either of them,
Really?
because I thought parties were a very bad thing to have. It just
think you're right.
divided people more.
You're absolutely right.
I thought that each congressman should really vote according to his own ideas and according to the desires of the people he represented, not because some party leader had established a
Everybody
line.
thought like that would be in much less trouble.
Well, I
than
hope
you
in the
are.
future that parties don't have such a big influence.
Well, parties are trying to. Well, how did you gain such acceptance, though? I mean, you weren't a party member, but still you were accepted.
Well, I was accepted to the point where I was reelected to a second term, and it had to be because of compromise.
Yeah, well,
that is, I had these two factions, and I had to get them together and knock their heads together and make them come up with an agreement, a middle-of-the-road agreement that could get passed by Congress, and that was reasonably
yeah,
successful.
but you did serve 2 terms, and that policy held until Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Oh, did it?
Yes,
oh,
it did.
Franklin who?
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
No, I never
yes,
heard of him.
he actually served another term.
Well, I'm glad that
People
prevailed.
loved him, yes.
Because I probably could have been elected for a third term, but it seemed to me just a bad idea. My main concern always was making sure that this democracy worked. Too many people thought always in terms of the monarchies in Europe, in which case they could not worry about things. There was a monarch to make all of the decisions. And there was the impetus I could see developing that would want to have the people put too much emphasis on the president, forget that they were the leaders of the country now, the average citizen. I wanted them to be educated, to make good decisions, and let their representatives know how they felt. And I thought if the president was for a third time, he'd be getting too much power. But the other thing is, having served 2 terms, I found how much it took out of you. And I felt by the time you get to the 3rd term, you've lost some of your energy, some of your spontaneity, and that it would be good to get someone fresh and energetic.
On the other hand, you probably don't think anyone should have just 1 term.
I think that as long as someone is doing what the people want and they're happy with them, they should be able to have a second term. I could foresee some cases where the people may become dissatisfied with this president and some of his policies that didn't conform to their own ideals,
Yeah.
in which case I would suspect a new president would be elected.
Yeah. Well, I know you want to talk about crossing the Delaware and the Battle of Trenton.
Yeah,
So
that makes a big
how
story.
come you were standing in the boat?
Oh, well, you're probably talking about a picture. I have one hanging on the wall there, as a matter of fact.
Yes, I see.
And there you see us crossing the Delaware. And you see there was ice, and it was cold water, it was rough water. Now, I ask you this. What crazy idiot would be standing up in a boat in the middle of the Delaware River?
You.
Well, I have to admit it. That crazy idiot was me. But
Yeah.
but it's really a long story. You want to hear the whole story?
Sure I do.
Well, this was in December of 1766. The war had been going badly for us. Our troops lost battles in Long Island. They lost in Manhattan. They were effectively thrown out, crossed the Hudson, ended up in New Jersey. There were battles in New Jersey they lost. And then we ended up crossing the Delaware and taking refuge in Pennsylvania. It was a very difficult time. We didn't have adequate provisions. We didn't have adequate clothing. The men were cold, sick, getting very disillusioned. So I felt I had to do something. And I thought back to my time in the Virginia militias when we were battling the French and the Indians. And I recall how the Indians did their battles, because they never really had troops to take advantage personnel-wise
Yeah.
of the enemy. They resorted to other kinds of tactics. So I thought, what would happen if we crossed the Delaware and we would have to walk down to Trenton and attacked? It was manned by Hessian troops, and there were a horrible amount of them. But I figured if we really attacked in the middle of the night, during the night after Christmas Eve, that is during early Christmas morning, we might have such an advantage that it would work. So I started this plan, and we had enough boats because we had used them in crossing the Delaware the other way. And we're about halfway across when there was a fellow in a boat next to me. His name was Benjamin Fush. And Benjamin Fush was a reporter from the Pennsylvania Gazette. And he traveled with us to send back articles about our movements. And Benjamin called over to me and he said, "General, this is going to be a historical event. I wonder if you would let me make a sketch of you." I said, sure, okay. He said, "But I really need you to stand up to make a decent sketch." So, stupid me, I stood up. The coxswain was yelling at me. He said, "General, the boat's rocking. We're going to keel over."
That is
And then
fun.
Benjamin said, "Just 30 seconds more and I'll have it." So he finished his sketch. And it was published in the Pennsylvania Gazette. And then it was only many years after that a whole bunch of different painters found that, and they made paintings depicting it. And if you look at all the different paintings, they're all different. Men are on a raft, some are on the boat.
Oh, really?
But this one got the essence of it. And,
That's really something.
but then we finally got to the shore. We had to walk to Trenton since we couldn't bring our horses in the boats. And we were deathly afraid that if some local person with a horse found us, he could get down to Trenton before we did and warn them. But we were lucky that way. we sprung upon them. There was not even a sentry out there. The Hessians
Really?
were mostly drunk to the gills, sound asleep in their barracks.
Christmas celebration. Yeah.
And it was wonderful because they had such supplies there. They had their hams and the sausages and the rum, and we all had a field day there.
Wow.
And ammunition, so we got so supplied that shortly after that, we attacked Princeton and had a big victory there.
Tell me about your relationship with Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin, he was a wonderful old guy. I admired him greatly. But he had some funny quirks. First, he was interested in so many different things. He was a wonderful negotiator. We had sent him to England and to France, and they all loved him there, and he was a great talent. He was also a scientist, and he experimented with electricity. And I really wonder, as I think back at how the poor guy never got himself killed. I'll just tell you about one experiment he did. Where he lived on his house, he had a tall spire on top of the building. And he was experimenting. He wanted to see if he could make lightning ring a bell. So on the on the third floor of his house, above the stairs, there was a little area there. He had a little table, and he had a bell hanging on it. And he connected a wire from the clapper of the bell up to the spire. Then he connected another wire from the bell housing down to a stake all the way down in the ground. And his theory worked. Whenever there didn't have to be lightning right there, if there was lightning anywhere in the vicinity, it would cause that clapper to move and ring the bell.
That's very
And he left it up there until his wife Deborah started complaining because the bell was ringing in the middle of the night, waking him up. So he had to get rid of that.
I want to talk about your marriage. I know you married Martha, and I've gotten the impression that although the marriage was considered compatible, it was not a love match.
Well, I don't know how you measure love. It's different kinds of loves. Well, I have to go back a bit because in my younger years I did have lots of girlfriends, and I had a couple of bad experiences. Girls that I was madly in love with, they ended up being unfaithful to me and going off to someone else. So I kind of developed in my mind what type of woman I really wanted to be with for the rest of my life. And I ended up feeling that things like graciousness, general goodness, steadfastness, reliability, all of those things were important. And Martha, she was wonderfully beautiful, and I did fall in love with her because of her looks. But I would not have allowed myself to fall in love if she didn't have all of these other characteristics. And it was a good decision because it was a wonderful marriage. She was a great help and inspiration to me.
I'm glad to hear that. Now let's talk about slavery. You did slavery.
I was afraid you'd bring that up.
Yeah, well, you did have slaves.
Yes. Well, you have to understand.
I mean, I know that was a time to have slaves.
Well, it was not just, the thing is, I was born in the society that had slaves. My parents owned slaves. When they passed away, I inherited slaves. So to me, it was like just something that is given. Mm-hmm. Like when you're hungry, you eat. It's something you didn't question. And the slaves in my family were always treated very well. We didn't arbitrarily sell slaves and break up the family. I would never do that. If we needed to sell slaves, it would be the whole family. Mm-hmm. And I come to, of course, some of them were household servants, and so got to know them very well. But it was only after later in life, when I've heard about how other people treated slaves, that it made me start questioning the whole philosophy about one human being owning another human being. And I came to pretty much reverse my feeling on it, although I didn't sell my slaves because they didn't seem like they would have been happy to be sold.
Yeah.
But there are a group of us, as we approach the Constitutional Convention, who really believed that slavery should be outlawed. I did believe that. And in fact, in my will, I dictated that upon my death, all of my slaves should be free. But the truth is, there just wasn't enough people that felt like we did to get anything done. And rather than have the whole Constitution in the United States disintegrate, we've decided not to push that issue. However, if you read the Declaration of Independence, you will see when it said that all men are created equal. I don't know how we got that through, but we did. And our purpose in doing that was to hope that in the future, some presidents and congressmen would look at that statement and say, by golly, I think they were really hoping that we would free the slaves.
Well, one of your successors did.
No.
The Emancipation Proclamation.
Oh.
Abraham Lincoln.
What was his name?
Abraham Lincoln. And there was a war, a civil war.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I was always hoping there would be no more wars.
Oh, no, there was a war. Just on a lighter vein, how do you feel about having your picture on the dollar bill?
Oh, well, I never agreed to that. I really didn't want it. But Alexander, I don't really believe I have to delegate responsibility. That's one of the things that made it possible for me to achieve what I did. And Alexander was very much in favor of that. There were other things he was pushing, like we ended up with, people always wanted to know what they should call me, and Alexander didn't want to be his highest excellency or these kinds of titles that the monarchs in Europe had. But again, I didn't want that much power in the president. I didn't want people looking at the president was the one who could make all the decisions. So we settled on Mr. President.
Well, you became the father of our country.
Well,
and that's
I'm very proud of that, though.
Yes.
Though I don't, when people talk that way, it makes it sound like I did it all. You have to remember.
Well, you started it all.
There are so many people involved in the revolution, in the creating of the government. You just don't want to give too much credit to any one person.
Tell me what it was like to have wooden teeth in your mouth.
Wooden teeth?
Yeah.
Where'd you ever get that crazy idea?
That's been passed down through the years. We've been taught that.
I never had wooden teeth.
You never did?
No.
You're kidding.
No. I've had 2 sets of false teeth. The first 2 were made out of rhinoceros tusks, that form of ivory.
Yeah.
And they worked out pretty good. But then the newer set of false teeth were being made out of actual human teeth. And they worked out better.
Wow. But we've always been told you had wooden teeth.
No, these the ones I'm wearing now, they work out.
There were no wooden teeth.
They work out pretty well. They're of human teeth, and they don't always stick too good.
Now I have to ask you about the cherry tree. You know what we've been told about the cherry tree. Is it true?
No, it's not true. I never heard of that. During my active participation in the war and the government, I never heard of that story.
So you were a little boy and you chopped down the cherry
No,
tree.
I never
and
chopped
your
down
father
anything.
wanted to punish you, and
If-
you said, "I cannot tell a lie. I did it."
If there's any hint of truth in that story, I don't know. You know how a story, when it gets passed on to the 10th generation, how it can get changed? The only thing I can think of was we did have fruit trees, and it was my responsibility during my early teen years and later to do the pruning of them. You had to prune the trees every winter, get rid of the new growth so the fruit would be good size. And one winter I didn't get around to it till early spring, and the sap had started to rise in the trees already, and another number of them died before as a result of that. And my father wasn't too happy about that.
I'm sure he wasn't.
But I don't know if that could have ever gotten twisted around to this silly story.
Do you have any celebration plans for your birthday?
No, I must admit, after my 200th birthday, I stopped recognizing them.
Okay. So is there anything else you would like to discuss?
Well, let's see if there's anything I really forgot about here. Well, I wanted to, some things get off my mind. My hopes for the future, if you would like. We were talking about the adulation of the president. I want everyone to realize that each citizen has the responsibility of being the person who runs the country. Each person should consider themselves the one that runs the country, make their desires known and implemented. And also I wanted to say something about wars. I hope there will be no wars in the future. But if there are, I hope they will be only for the purpose of defending our country and preserving our freedom. Excuse me.
Certainly.
But if there are wars, when the soldiers come back, that those survive, I would like all of you, the residents of this community, the province of Leisure Village West, to honor the returning veterans, to make sure that they're clothed, they're fed, and they're given everything that they should have, because they're the people that have given you your life and your liberty. So with that, I will say, fare thee well.
And I will say, "'Tis well," which were your last words
Right.
on this earth.
I just barely remember.
Yeah. This concludes our Spotlight program for today. It has been recorded and will be shown this evening at 6 p.m. and Tuesday and Thursday at 1 and 6. Thank you for watching Spotlight.